AI, as we know, is already screening a lot of CVs on behalf of people. We know this. Writing job adverts, even predicting culture fits. It's a scary tool. But we're on the edge of a talent revolution right now. Or, as predicted on here, is it a lawsuit? So today we're going to unpack some of that information through the wonderful panelists we've got today. So, to get it going, let's start with a bold promise. So bold promises are that AI is going to change the future. It's a question to any of you. Where does the line draw on AI? Where's the legal risks and where are they already looming? Anybody?
I'll happily jump in there. Yes, I agree. AI will change the world. Will it change it for the better? I don't know. I bloody hope so, but I don't know. I think we're entering a space that is not regulated, and we're entering a space where actually this audience and other TA professionals are going to set the standards that we accept. But also, I think our candidates are going to be driving a big piece. If we're really honest, we're already behind the candidates. Like the amount of candidates, they don't have any of our AI bollocks that we have to go through, the ethics boards, the sign off by everyone else. So they're doing it. They're auto-applying, they're auto-writing, they're auto-finding, they're even auto-interviewing. So they're already ahead of us. So we got to catch up with them. Mm-hmm. So yes, it will massively change. Legal, yeah, massively grey area. August 2026, I think we'll know where we land on that side. So I'm not going to say too much because it might not age very well by that point.
No, it's a good point. I think you touched on it well with competency with AI, right? Everybody's using it. All companies are using it for efficiency now as well. But when you talk about legal, can AI help us reduce or help us with discrimination, do you think? Is that a technology that can use it, or does it open us up to potential legal claims as we use it and acknowledge it moving forwards?
Yeah, I better take that. So I'm the token lawyer in the room, everyone. I'm James Clark. I'm here representing Yoono, act as their chief legal officer, and come visit us on stand 34 over there. And this is an area of particular interest for me. So amongst other things, I sit on the legal working group for UK AI, which is the AI industry trade body. And we're trying to answer this exact question, right? So sort of how will AI be regulated by the law? How do we address those challenges? And I think your question was a really interesting one, because a lot of people dive straight in with the legal risks around using AI in recruitment. And those risks are very real. So they exist both under current law, data protection law, equality law, employment law. There are all sorts of things we could talk about in that space. And it's only going to become more complex. You were alluding to August 2026, which is when the EU AI Act high-risk provisions come into force. And as some of you will know, one of the high-risk use cases for AI under the AI Act is in recruitment. So that's going to add an additional layer of regulation. But your question was a great one, because it was, if I heard it correctly, can we actually reduce some of our legal risks by using AI? And I think the answer to that is yes, absolutely. If you're using AI responsibly, it can help you to, find out more about a candidate, get to know that candidate better, make a more informed decision, which can help you to make the right recruitment decision, which from a legal perspective is really important. I'm sure everyone in this room knows about the impending changes to employment law that are coming, the day one unfair dismissal rights that are coming down the path. That massively increases the risk of a bad hire. And so actually having the right tools at the recruitment stage so you can make a better, more informed decision about who you hire, so you reduce the risk of making a bad hire, which then leads to the legal challenges around unfair dismissal. That's incredibly important. But also, as you said, sort of knowing more about a candidate is potentially better for both you and the candidate, enables a fairer recruitment decision, provided you're using the right tools with reputable, high-quality data. You're exercising appropriate oversight and judgment over how you use those tools. And I think the message I always like to give people is it is absolutely possible to use AI tools in recruitment in full compliance, not just with existing laws, but with upcoming laws like the AI Act. anyone tells you that you can't use AI tools in recruitment in compliance with the law, that's wrong. But you have to be careful about which tools you use, and you have to be careful about how you use them. And so absolutely you need to be informed in making those decisions.
Super interesting. So James, you talk about Yoono. And if I've got this correctly, Yoono is all about knowing the candidate, right, within the audience. So can you just share what kind of opportunities Yoono is building that will help reassure clients when they're utilizing AI?
Yeah, absolutely. So at Yoono, it's a tool that will allow you to produce a report on a recruitment candidate, drawing from a wide range of publicly available sources and using AI to help create a really clear executive summary about that candidate, about their background, about their strengths and their weaknesses, that then gives you an excellent starting point for a more in-depth and more informed recruitment process. But in building that tool, I have spent a lot of time as a legal advisor working directly with our CTO in understanding, the data sources that we're relying on. Are they reputable? Do we have the correct licenses to use those data sources? Is the AI model producing accurate and fair summaries based on the information that it's processing? Do we understand where we as a provider sit in the sort of legal chain? Do we understand our obligations, for example, as a data processor under GDPR? Do we have contracts that give appropriate reassurances to the customer that assign liability appropriately? So, I've been really fortunate to work with a company in Yoono that fully understands and buys into the importance of building the tool correctly, adopting what in GDPR terms is referred to as a privacy by design approach, where you build in sort of the right controls, checks and balances at the outset so that the tool is compliant by design. But the journey doesn't end there. We also spend time talking to prospective customers about how they can use the tool, appropriately and responsibly, because, part of the emphasis is on Yoono as the provider and the developer of the tool, but part of the responsibility also lies with the company that's using the tool to make sure that they're using it in the right way as it was designed, that they've got the human in the loop that is, appropriately assessing and using the outputs of the tool in the correct way. So yeah, I've been really fortunate to work with a company that has, understood the importance of doing that correctly.
Interesting. So when AI tools in recruitment actually face those kind of legal risks, like how do we protect our brands? How do we protect brand reputation? So Jules, maybe, how would we look at that from maybe a brand perspective?
So I think your legal department are your first stop, and I think it is very much working really closely with your legal department, with your IT department, but also with your providers, with your tech stack providers. They are the experts after all, and like they will have somebody in the background saying, yes, you can do this, no, you can't do that. And I think when you bring all of that advice together, that's where you need to make that decision. But, let's reverse a little bit. Let's go back 30 years and think about that kind of .com revolution. For anybody that remembers it, we're not in a dissimilar moment now to we were then, where there was a complete lack of regulation, where people talked about .com businesses. Nobody talks about .com businesses now. We just talk about businesses. And I think we need to kind of project forwards into that is what it's going to become. We are in a moment of flux, which is difficult to navigate. But as you've heard, this is all going to become clear. The legal ramifications are going to wash out. In the meantime, lean on the people that know, lean on your advisors, and frankly, keep it simple. We don't need to boil the ocean about this right now. We can integrate AI into our processes if we do it thoughtfully and if we continue to keep the human touch.
Interesting. Really, really interesting. And for the question for you guys out here, how many of you are using AI right now within your business? How many even, well, the people that are not, why? Is it legal risks? Is it understanding? Hands up for understanding? Legal risks? Legal risks? Budget? A few different things, right? Recruitment, Brainfood. Your network is vast. You hear a lot of things. What are sort of the fears or resistance maybe, or even the positive stories that you're hearing about AI within businesses right now?
Well, I think the compliance risk is real. It's almost certainly the biggest barrier towards accelerating the adoption of artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
So I think TA and HR in particular feel that very keenly. HR comes generally from a compliance route. If you think about sort of the history of the discipline, it's generally about regulations. It's generally about it's a very legally driven function. So I think in many respects, that's been a big constraint for us to adopt a lot of the technologies. And we're feeling like two kind of conflicting pressures, really, because the C-level is dissatisfied generally with the rate of AI adoption across the different departments. So all of us are feeling pressure internally to actually accelerate and adopt more. But then we're wrestling with essentially maybe a correct culture. I don't want to say correct or incorrect, but we're wrestling with an internal culture that is very risk averse. Whereas you look at sales, far less risk averse. I think they're far more ahead when it comes to, right, we're charging forward, we're going to generate this. So we're caught in that bit of tension. I think we'll find our way through. I think we need people like James to sort of be around and be visible and lead the discourse. I think we've also got to sort of understand that if we kind of don't have a forward-first policy as a function, the people at the individual level are going to go ahead and just experiment without direction. Like, we know that the vast majority of use of AI currently is undirected, unsolicited, and kind of ungoverned AI use.
Yep.
So in other words, your people are using ChatGPT to do things they probably shouldn't be doing.
Yep.
And that's primarily because we haven't raised the literacy within the organization, or we've adopted maybe the wrong posture. We've maybe said, hey, AI is all bad, guys, can't use it, don't use it. We hear that, the employee will hear that at a legal compliance level, but then they'll say, hang on, I can get faster a little bit by using this, who's going to know? And then they're going to go ahead and do that. So I think one of the things HR and TA need to do is raise the AI literacy level as much as we can within our function, but also within the rest of the organization, and then steer a clear direction, give the organization a sense that we're making forward progress with it. So we've got to take like that lean forward approach with AI, even though if it's at tension a little bit with our compliance roots.
Yeah. Can I just add to that? I mean, I think that's a great point, because it's something that often comes up for me as a lawyer with clients. There are certain issues where you just know instinctively, if you tell the business no, like a flat no, they're just going to go and do it anyway, but they won't come and talk to you about it, and they'll go and find a workaround. And so actually, and to your point, just going and using ChatGPT to do, because the whole point is that ChatGPT is a general purpose AI tool that can do, in theory, a lot of the things that a lot of the companies in this room can do, but it's not been designed and trained specifically to do those tasks, which is a problem both in terms of the accuracy and the effectiveness to which it can perform those tasks, but also from a legal perspective, the extent to which you can actually rely on the tool being fit for purpose to perform those tasks, and the extent to which you would have any claim against the provider of that tool if it didn't perform those tasks correctly. If you go to a specialist provider an AI tool, Yoono or many of the other companies in this room, those underlying AI models, many of which are based on the same models used by ChatGPT, so the GPT model, for example, but they've been trained over many months or years to specifically perform the recruitment tasks that you want them to perform, and the providers of those tools will give you a contract that makes certain guarantees and gives you a much more favorable liability position if the tool doesn't function in the way they say it's going to function. So absolutely, if you're working for a business that's just trying to stop you from using these things completely, that's not a long-term sustainable position. Instead, you need to embrace AI, but you need to use the right tools, and you need to understand how to use those tools.
So the audience, some of the audience are already using the tools. Some of the audience are not using the tools. So I guess two-part question to it, I guess, in theory, but where do we start? For the people that are using it currently right now, how do they audit themselves? How do they regulate what they're using? Or for the people that aren't using it, that have heard all this good stuff, but then also heard the alarm bells of legal, they're going to come down and you do all this stuff, right? ChatGPT's wild, wild west out there. How do we get ourselves into a position where we get comfortable with AI? Nick?
Yeah, more than happy to take this. And I actually posted a blog on LinkedIn last week on 10 questions when buying AI in TA. The first one is, what are you trying to do with it? Start there. As TA leaders, we are often magpied by shiny shit. We have vendors around this room and others that give us swag and they sell us the sexiness of it's this and it's agentic. That's the new phrase, right? If you're not buying agentic AI, what a pauper we are. But actually, what's it solving? What is the problem? And did that problem exist before we saw the shiny shit? Because a lot of the time it doesn't. And I work with a lot of TA tech companies, supporting them on their roadmap and all of those bits. And I've probably seen more agentic agents in the last month than any of you would ever care to see. And I would say 90% of those are worse or longer than before there was an agent. And I'm talking like things that used to do 2 clicks, now there's 5 to 12 prompts to an agent. But it's cool. We like it. So start with, what are your pain points? If you look at the hiring cycle, I've done this a number of times with many different businesses. The single longest part of your hiring cycle is your onboarding period. Now, there's not a lot you can do to make that shorter. You could technically only hire people immediately available. It's not an advised strategy, and do it at your own risk. The second longest part is the time it takes to attract or engage the person who goes on to be hired. Typically, most companies, it's about 30 days. That feels like a good place to solve for. How do you make that faster? You're not asking the managers to interview in 2 seconds and hire today. Those parts, they still need time. They still need to feel that a decision has been made. And whether the business might want to run faster, doesn't matter, because the candidate might not. And when you push a candidate too fast, no is where they get to. They gets their back up and it feels weird. So think about, what problems are you solving? Screw AI. Screw, is it a person? Is it resource? Is it platform? Is it AI? Is it agentic? Doesn't matter. Find your pain points and then look at the solutions that are out there. And a lot of the time it's your processes. Your processes are broke. And AI won't fix those processes. AI will automate those broken processes. So what you end up with is building this Jenga tower of tech stack on top of each other, and it will break somewhere. And when it does come crashing down, that's a good time to get your CV updated, because it's not pretty and it takes a lot of undoing. But start with your problems. What are the things that you do the most repeatable, the most painful, the most expensive? Then look at solutions around that. Walking around here today, you'll see some really cool stuff. You'll get some really cool swag. Just take it away and go, do I need that? If I didn't have this water bottle, this X, this Y, this Z, whatever it is, would I still give a shit about what they were selling to me? So that's my big ask for all of us today.
I love that. The shiny shit is literally what us recruiters love, right? It's the shiny shit. I guess when the shiny shit breaks, or it makes a legal case for discrimination, as an example, whose ownership is that? Is it HR? Is it the tech company that provides the AI tool? Is it leadership? Where does that fall? Where does that land? Anybody?
Ooh, when stuff breaks, whose fault is it? We're sitting in a room of TA professionals, I wonder. Listen, I think it is going to break, stuff is going to break, and stuff is going to go wrong. We are all on a learning journey with this together. And I think that's why my biggest advice is start small. Keep it simple. What you said about looking at processes, that is where we are going to break the least. if we just look at what are those repeatable tasks, and I know it's really dull, and I know everybody wants the shiny shit because that sounds better in the boardroom, but actually just automating those little pieces, giving what our people are always asking for, which is time to do the more interesting stuff, that's where you're going to break the least. When it does break, if you have, and if it does break, if you have consulted in the correct way, as we mentioned earlier, with our legal colleagues, with our IT colleagues, then there's a collective responsibility, but there's also an acknowledgement that this is a new world that we're entering, and we've got some collective responsibility here. And do your due diligence. I mean, that, as long as you can do your due diligence and you can hand that over and say, look, this is the research that we did, and you've done that properly, and you've tested, and you've tried, and you've acknowledged, then we've all got to take collective responsibility, is my view.
Yeah. And I think in terms of the answer to your question, who is responsible, who's liable when the tool breaks or something goes wrong, as any good lawyer knows, the answer to that and nearly every other legal question is it depends. That's
the book.
But that is, genuinely the answer, because there are different responsibilities on both sides. And to give a very simple answer, if you look at the GDPR, you as the data controller, when you're using a tool, you're going to have most of the responsibility and liability. Under the AI Act, that sort of flips around, because the provider of the tool actually has more responsibilities in terms of building that tool in a safe way before they're allowed to sell it to you as the deployer. I would say, if you want my very top tips for companies as users of AI tools in recruitment, number one would be transparency. So this is like a legal requirement under GDPR. It will be a legal requirement under the AI Act. It's also the right thing to do, is to be transparent with candidates about where you're using AI in the recruitment process and what the impact of that AI tool on them is. And in particular, are you using AI around decisioning in the recruitment process, because that is particularly impactful from a legal perspective. Secondly, being really careful about choosing, and I sort of touched on this point earlier, but choosing the right AI tool and making sure that the tool that you're buying, the provider can sort of give you assurance that the tool has been designed and trained to do the thing that you want it to do. And then the final one is human oversight, human in the loop, which I'm sure you will all have heard in various talks about AI. But it's important, again, not just from a sort of ethical perspective, but it's important from a legal perspective. And, things like the automated decision-making regime under GDPR, which some of you might be familiar with, you can actually avoid a lot of that as an issue if you are taking the AI tools' outputs into account, but you're not blindly relying on them when making decisions as part of a hiring process. That you, for example, allow the candidate to make their own representations about the information that might be provided by the tool. You take into account other sources of information. You make a holistic decision so that you're not just blindly following the recommendations or outputs that the tool is giving you.
Comprehensive. Hung, as recruiters in this room, and we're talking about obviously trying to make a potential future-proof strategy with avoiding legal disasters. What tips would you give us that we can look to walk away from today that will enable us to build that future-proof AI strategy, do you think?
Truth is, I don't know. I think anybody who does overly confidently predict what the future looks like or make recommendations, you need to be suspicious of that, because we're all being caught on the hop with these predictions. It's moving way too fast for anybody to analyze what's going on. I think that the approach has got to be a step-by-step approach. We talked about the low-hanging fruit. I think you can take guidance from the EU AI Act in the sense of how they kind of do the hierarchy of risk. So start with the lowest hierarchy of risk. Mm-hmm. That's probably like scheduling interviews. That's probably the area that's of lowest risk, which is part of the reason why it's been the highest of adoption. Start there. If you're still chasing people around with email chains, let's get rid of that as step one. So then you just keep going up the ladder as you go through there. As it gets higher risk, my own sort of opinion would be I'd kind of leave it for some of the bigger boys to roll the AI into us. So in other words, let's say you've got these recommendation engines saying, okay, here's a list of candidates. We recommend these are your top ranking, whatever. Kind of LinkedIn are already doing that.
Yeah.
You know, they're
Yeah.
making recommendations of jobs. They're making recommendations of candidates and what have you. You know what? I'd say that's on LinkedIn. And it's like, don't go and experiment with a narrow point solution that might replicate some of that stuff, because probably your liability is going to be, your liability risk will be higher simply because of the size of the vendor and the lobbying power of the vendor even.
Yeah.
So you got to think about, okay, what happens down the line? We understand that it's bringing some global politics here, so why not? We've got different competitive legislative regimes that are increasingly in contention. So the EU previously has always been perceived as, look, it's going to be that highest sort of in terms of compliance. All product makers should build towards the EU, because you know what, if you hit the EU and you satisfy what the EU wants, it's going to be okay in US and everywhere else. And if you're using a US tool that doesn't comply with that, then obviously, you know, people might be able to sue you. But we've already seen that politics is coming into this, where people like Donald Trump has literally said, don't you dare sue US companies, otherwise we're going to hammer you. So I think inevitably we're going to think, okay, do we now like trust the EU's legislative power, regulatory power in the same way? Or do we kind of read the runes and say, you know what, chances are the EU is going to kind of soft shoe it because it's terrified of a punitive reaction from the United States. So what does that mean? That means I think I'm a little bit more confident in the use of AI, even though from the letter of the law, it probably is not a good advice. So please don't take my advice. But I think the contention we're having at the geopolitical level should make it less, like I would imagine that the legislative risk will go down simply because there's implications of those cases actually being found out. We'll find out soon enough. Like basically, didn't the EU level something like a 2 billion fine on Google or something like that? Trump is going to react to that, and I think the EU backs down. When the EU backs down, then you can kind of see where you know, how the bread is buttered, basically.
Okay. Interesting. So, what can HR leaders do then to prepare for any challenge, like from an audit perspective, potentially? Is there anything that we can start to build to get ahead of potential risk, potential challenges, like an audit trail, documentation, setup?
Start now and start before you buy something. If you're trying to retrospectively do it, you're already screwed. Because to James's point, it is a shared accountability. I guarantee if you haven't had that conversation with a vendor, it's yours. Because they don't want to accept it, they don't want to take it, and neither do we. We want to push it all to them, they want to push it all to us. So you need those conversations at the very, very start. I think you also, Hung mentioned it, you need to make sure you're working with a vendor that can defend themselves and you. I work with some really, really talented, tiny companies that are literally two of them creating great solutions. If they got challenged, not a hope. They just fold. They just give up. They go, yep, fine, how much? Done. And then that comes to you. So to Hung, your point, work with the LinkedIn, work with likes of those. They will all have audit trails because they won't just be covering you, they'll be covering themselves. And they will be able to track everything. Everything should be defensible, but also just ask them. When you're getting the demos here today, sorry to everyone who is from a vendor here today, but like ask them how they will protect you, how they will support you, how will they make sure that they keep you on the right side of the law. Even if your team's, look, we're a bunch of recruiters, we cut every corner we possibly can. How will you still not get destroyed once we've cut those corners? So ask them and partner them. And honestly, if you walk away from that conversation going, I don't believe it, you probably shouldn't. You should go and find another vendor. So it's not the sexy part of the conversation, it's not the cost, it's not the impact. But if someone can't say how that business will support you, they probably don't know themselves.
So, for anybody that's in the audience right now that's not maybe a recruitment leader and is just, you know, recruiting on a day-to-day, and we're using the ChatGPTs, the co-pilots, whatever other AI technology we've got, where do we counsel legal? Like, or do we just continue? Like, do I just get ChatGPT up on my phone and just set this up, create this, and crack on with it? Or do I now, based on some of the advice here, just check in maybe with legal or check in with my leader?
I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. I would say definitely check in. You know, I'm sitting here as an enthusiastic amateur. I am certainly not an expert. I don't think any of us are. But, you know, what I have done when we've been looking at how we integrate AI into our processes is checked in with the people that are the AI experts in our building. I've checked in with our legal department, and actually probably there's some stuff that you don't know exists. I didn't know that we have a policy that requires us to log any agents that we build. I had no idea, but we do. So yeah, I think it's really important to check in to make sure you're covering yourselves. The business is going to support you fundamentally, I believe, because it is adding efficiency, it's creating the opportunity to add value to the work that we do. And that's what we all want to do. We want to add value to the business, and we want to be able to demonstrate how we are doing that. So yes, don't go for the shiny shit. Do go for the sensible, well thought out solutions, and check in. It's a team game as we navigate this world together.
And this is a question for each of you individually. So, similar to your answer there, what one compliance or governance step should every leader in this room, HR, take to protect their organization tomorrow, once they've left this building?
Speak to HR. Speak to legal. Talk to the people that know more than you do. You know, we're recruiters, we're talent acquisition leaders, we're not AI specialists, we're not legal specialists. We're great at what we do. We understand our processes, and we really understand where it can help. And we can really unpick where our issues lie and what problems we're trying to solve. What we're not are the people that understand the technology back to front, the legal ramifications and so on. So the first thing I would do, if you haven't done it already, is just go and talk to the people that know more than you do.
Nick?
Do an amnesty. Ask who's already doing something that they possibly shouldn't be. Guaranteed shouldn't be. And what that tells you is they're doing it because you didn't do it with them or for them. They're not doing it because they want to be a pain in the arse. They're doing it because there's a problem. I spoke of it earlier. We're recruiters. We cut corners. They found a way to cut a corner ahead of this room, ahead of us. So ask them, find out what the problems are. You will probably find out, as I spoke about those processes that are broken, that you didn't know are broken because we're just a little bit removed from the day-to-day. So ask them, do an amnesty, don't shoot anyone, don't persecute anyone, just find out what's happening. And then look at going and speaking to the right and relevant teams around, look, we've seen this, it's improved this, it's simplified that, this is better. How do we do it right? How do we do it properly? And what you'll probably find is there's probably 4 or 5 different things that your teams are doing that you didn't know that you needed to do because you're looking at something else, something bigger. They're the points that you start, and that's where you begin. And then you get into this upwards feeding cycle of these are the problems I'm facing on the ground. Here's how we fix it. And adoption is much better. Progress is much better. It's a lot less of the Wild West because you know what is going on. And you've created a culture of continuous improvement and listening, which not only gets you out of an AI problem, but also solidifies your team to be a really good, high-performing team.
James, hang on. He should have the last word, is the truth.
Yeah.
Talking heads is all well and good, but I really think that we do need to lean on legal expertise. So let's have James have the last word. My comment here is kind of just underline what I said about AI literacy. I do think probably the best thing you can do to reduce liability risk is just to elevate the literacy level, AI literacy level across every employee in the business. OpenAI does free courses, Microsoft does free courses. we should be telling the business every one of our sort of employees needs to go on these courses.
Yeah.
We all need to up level to understand how to use AI effectively, because that will help us avoid scenarios where we're abusing AI's output. So AI literacy, that's what I would recommend you do.
And just on that, AI literacy is already a legal requirement under the AI Act as of earlier this year.
We didn't know that, did we?
You're already, you know, if you operate at all in the EU, you're already required by law to train your employees on AI.
Take me away.
Okay.
Goodness me.
So my sort of top tip to finish on, and you know, my sales colleagues at Yoono won't thank me for this, but don't be afraid to interrogate your vendors. You know, to ask them some really tough questions. You know, everything from their awareness of some of the laws that we've been talking about, whether it's GDPR, whether it's AI Act, and where they fit into that ecosystem, what their responsibilities are. Also, sort of more technical questions around what steps they've taken to test the underlying models in their tools, you know, for bias, for accuracy. And, you know, beware of the suppliers that give you the glib answers, and actually take comfort in a supplier that might say, that's a really good question. I need to go and talk to my CTO. I need to talk to my GC. I think we've got some material on that. Let me send you some FAQs. You know, they sort of show that they've actually engaged with these things substantively. They've thought about it. They appreciate it's complex and there aren't easy answers, but they've really tried to engage with it in how they've built the product and brought it to market.
Well, thank you very much. Now.